All right.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Jasmine Johnson. I am the executive director of the Baton Rouge Area Youth Network, also known as BRAIN. Today's conversation is a direct extension of our back to school convening back in July of this year. That convening gathered local organizations, funders, and education leaders to ask, how do we move from crisis to capacity? Today, we're continuing that conversation here in a digital space where even more of you can join in. This is not just timely, it's urgent. The fiscal year 2026 federal budget proposal eliminates 21st century community learning centers, the only federal funding stream dedicated to after school and summer learning. In Louisiana, the need is already staggering. For every one child in an out of school time program, four more are waiting. Families are asking for more opportunities, not fewer. This LinkedIn Live creates mutual benefit. It's a chance for our network to hear expert insights and actionable strategies. And it's also a platform to elevate our panelists' leadership in shaping the future. I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Sonia Daniels, who brings a wealth of perspective on trust, strategy, and resilience in out of school time programs and funding. Dr. Daniels, welcome. Welcome. Can you, and thank you for being with us today. Before we dive in, I'd like you to briefly introduce yourself and share, a little bit about your credentials. But then I have a question, which is, can you share a practice you return to when you need to reset, reimagine, or restore hope in your work?
Yes. So, first of all, Jasmine, it's such a pleasure and an honor to share this stage with you. I know we've been having this conversation for a while, and so I'm excited that the day is finally here. So, of course, you shared a little bit about my work, but I want to share my connection to out of school time programming because I think that is important to kind of set the foundation of my expertise and why I'm passionate about this work. So, as a person raised by a single mom, out of school time programming was critical in my life. Being able to have a space to go either before school, after school, or during the summer was critical to be able to kind of fill in those gaps. To support the limited capacity my mom had while raising multiple kids. And so for me, it just became what I knew in my life, being a part of out of school time programs. And so what was really interesting that my first job ever was an after school program. I worked at the YMCA of Acadiana in Lafayette as a site director. And so after school programming has been it holds a space in my heart. And so in my career, I've had other opportunities to support out of school time programming with some local nonprofits here in Baton Rouge. And so it's just a place that is really important to me, but I also understand just the critical nature of where things are right now, given our economy and just a lot of decisions being made in public policy. And so I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today. Now, to answer your question, what do I use or what practices I return to kind of restore hope? So I am big into meditation and just becoming one with myself, but I like to do it in nature. So I love hiking. I love being out with the trees and the birds and just being able to be one with nature, and really just to kind of quiet things around me to return to myself to be able to restore hope and order. So.
Oh yeah, thank you. And look, I think we've had conversations about it. I can relate so much to loving nature and using it to keep me centered and truly to restore hope. I can go on and on about trees, but yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. We're gonna jump right into the questions. At our July convening, I did ask some core questions because we talk about collaboration, we talk about funding, we talk about being future ready, um, but it's time for us to really like dive deep and talk about like what's limiting the behavior. So the first question is, from your perspective, do organizations lead better when they operate with an abundance mindset? And what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, that's such a great question to start off with. And so my immediate answer is going to be definitely yes. But I think it's important to kind of set the foundation for how we define abundance, because I think that's important, because it might mean something different for every person who is listening or will listen to this conversation. And so the way that I view abundance, even though it's very simple by definition, in practice, it requires a lot of intention. So I define abundance as just the belief that there are unlimited opportunities for us, right? As people, whether individuals, whether as organizations, abundance is essentially all around us. And so I believe that organizations who operate in the belief or mindset that there are unlimited opportunities tend to not only function better as organizations, but they also are willing to be innovative and try new things. Especially when we talk about our current economy right now, it definitely is requiring organizations to be a bit more innovative in their practices and kind of think outside of the box. And so I believe right now, our current times and our current climate is definitely calling for people to shift into a more abundant mindset, to realize and understand that there are opportunities all around us. How do we, work through those opportunities, or how do we connect ourselves to those opportunities? And I think that all starts in the mind.
Yes, absolutely. Are there any just in your time, you work with nonprofits, you work with out of school time programs and services. Um, are there any examples of those practices that you see?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, as a consultant, my approach when I work with organizations is sometimes I work with leaders who may feel stuck in their work, understandably so, because there's so much on their plate. And so a lot of times our conversations literally consist of, what do you want in a perfect world? This is like my go-to statement. In a perfect world, what would you want your organization to look like? Or in a perfect world, what are you trying to accomplish? And I think sometimes people, I sense that they're hesitant to answer that question. And I'm like, look, let's put it all out on the table and talk about what is it that you actually want. And then as a consultant, I will figure out how to build that bridge to help you get there, right? And so that is usually my approach when we talk about being able to think about unlimited opportunities when I'm working with organizations, who are often, met with challenges or come across roadblocks in their work, especially when we talk about the nonprofit sector as a whole. But for me, I like to help leaders really think outside of the box and think about just all of the possibilities. And then we build plans and strategies around what that could look like.
Yes, yes, I love that. So I'm hearing like go ahead and dream big. I think it's
As
that
big as possible.
very audacious goal. Like go ahead and truly like an abundance mindset does shift your planning strategy to possibility.
Yes.
So I think some of the common terms is going from surviving to thriving, and you don't get to a point of thriving without dreaming about it
Yeah.
first.
So true.
Um, yeah. So, okay. Well, the next question has to do about, um, abundance mindset, and how you utilize um, those who share your mission. So that question is, when thinking about human capital, what
Mhm.
does it mean to deploy people where they're most strategic, and how can youth serving organizations align with that idea?
I love this question so much, Jasmine. So, a few years ago, I discovered this framework called the Zone of Genius framework. And I believe I talked a little bit about it in the Brain Conference earlier this year, in the session I facilitated. And so, one of the things that I have been learning that's critically important when we talk about human capital and the talent that works within organizations is that people have to do work that not only makes sense to them, but also is meaningful to them, right? And so each of us in our jobs, whether we, run businesses or run nonprofits, work within organizations, we all want to be able to show up every day and do work that means something to us while still being able to influence or impact the people around us. And so it's important that folks who are in organizations and also leaders kind of understand how people can really understand what their zone of genius is. And this is what people, what they actually do really well, almost what people can do in their sleep, coupled with what they're extremely passionate about. And so I think it's critical that folks kind of take some time to understand how that intersection works for them so that they can be in positions that they just really enjoy what they do and then really enjoy what they're good at. And so when that comes to organizations, what that means, especially when we're talking about working with youth, which I think is really important, is understanding then how do we show up in our roles, because kids are watching us, right? And out of school time programming, any role I've had to be really critical in being cognizant about how I show up in that work, because I knew I was being watched and observed with by the youth who were around me. And so that for me made me want to make sure I was in a position where I not only was like good at what I did, but I was also happy with what I did, because I knew that was going to reflect on the children that I was working with. And so I think that's a really critical space where youth serving organizations should prioritize making sure that people are in the right place when they're working in out of school time programming. Because the way I look at it is that out of school time work is not just daycare, it's not just aftercare. We are shaping the future generations who will lead our world and lead us, honestly. And so we have to make sure that they're getting what they need, but that starts by us showing up in a way to ensure that they actually get what they need and they can observe, not just have us say do this, but we're doing it as well. So essentially practicing what we preach. Now I know you had a second part to that question and I forgot it already.
No, that was I think you well, let me see. Well, it was how can youth serving organizations align with that idea? And I kind of feel like you answered it, but if
Okay.
you have more to say about it, sure.
Yeah. Well, I would actually say I think a critical part of professional development and leadership development, specifically within the out of school time space, I think there does need to be, and I know there are organizations that do this already, but just as we continue to develop people, just making sure that as we're teaching people core skills,
Mhm.
especially when we talk about being in a technology revolution that we're in right now with the quick, integration of AI and other tech tools, we still need to make sure that people are not only enhancing but improving their core skills, which a lot of times we call soft skills, but at this point, I think they're just critical, like human skills we should have. And so I think with that, a lot of when organizational leaders are thinking about professional development, a lot of it should be centered around making sure, again, not only that people understand their zone of genius, but that they are well versed in communication, not only within themselves, but with their peers, with the students that they serve, being able to really enhance their skills around conflict. I think that's a big thing that, trips us all up, because everybody has different conflict resolution and conflict management skills. And I think essentially we all like are saying the same thing, but we speak different languages too. So it's like really helping people understand how to just like be able to decipher and speak the language that other people are speaking, when we're just in workplaces trying to accomplish the same thing. So I wanted to add that, just to, say that like core skills are going to be necessary, especially, with this topic being like future ready. when we talk about the future of work, those core skills are what organizations really need to be prioritizing to ensure that people really know how to navigate what the future of this work is going to look like.
Yeah, no, I love that, especially the professional development piece. So, what I'm hearing you say is mutual benefit.
Mhm.
It should be a part of your strategic plan. Like that's where we're moving to. That's where you get the best out of
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
And I love how you mentioned and just reminded the audience that these programs are not just babysitting
Mhm.
services. I know that I was a strong student
Yeah.
and naturally strong in math and science, and actually love both subjects. But when you ask me what was my favorite class in high school, it was art.
Mine too.
Right? Like that's the only teacher's name that I remember.
Mhm.
It is definitely the class that I remember going to and creating pottery. That's where I was introduced to a kiln.
Yeah.
It was the class where I was able to be curious.
Mhm.
And so these out of school time programs, these enrichment programs, and some of them are also aligned with the school day as far as academics, when it comes to tutoring and homework help and, skills gap, programs. But for the most part, they are enrichment. And
Mhm.
so, they're important.
Yeah.
It's important to be balanced. And so thank you for highlighting that.
Mhm.
Um, I also want to just add to it by saying what I'm hearing you say definitely aligns with my personal beliefs. Whether that person is an employee or a volunteer. Brain participated in the mayor's youth workforce experience, my we,
Yeah.
this summer, and I was actually asked to record a testimonial because of how successful um, I was with the MyWe. What are they? Intern, the MyWe intern, and um, what I explained to them is there are a couple of things strategically that I did. One was daily check-ins. We did
Mhm.
this joyful practice for me to understand not only who you are, but like who you want to be, what things you want to gain out of this experience. I took that application and looked through like where that intern was going next to see how I could align the projects with skills that that intern already had, but
Mhm.
also giving that intern room to grow. So there were like 6 projects, and it's like, okay, it's going to stretch you on this scale. So, like on a scale of 1 to 10, this one's going to stretch you this much. This one's going to stretch you this much. And it's like, so how far do you want to be stretched, or
Mhm.
do you want to be stretched at all?
Mhm.
Because I have a list of 10 projects,
Yeah.
on a spectrum. And so it's really about like what you want to get out of this experience. Well, I will tell you, it was very successful and very rewarding to see how at the end of the summer, how proud of himself he was.
Mhm.
um, but also me being able to in my letter at the end share with him the skills that he gained and how he should put them on his resume. So
Mhm.
I do think it absolutely should be strategic. You will get out, much more out of that experience. Like I said, whether they're a volunteer, whether they're there for a short term or long term. So yeah, so thank you for
Yeah.
that answer and affirming that I'm on the right track.
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, we all have room to grow. And so I think it's so helpful to be in spaces that like encourage us to grow, but that also provide like a safe space to be like, hey, I know I might not be the best in this area, but I have somebody who's willing to like hold my hand and like help me improve in certain areas. So I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah. So, and that's part of, I think, building that, you
Mhm.
know, crisis resilient model, which
Mhm.
segues to our next question.
Yeah.
In your experience,
Mhm.
what makes a business model crisis resilient, and what lessons can OST leaders take from that?
Yes. So, oh my God, this is such a perfect question. And I can answer it from my own experience this year because I did a full 180 in my business and did a pivot. And so I feel like that experience has been able to help me articulate to the organizations that I work with of what does crisis ready organizations look like. And the biggest part of it is being adaptable. Like that is the key word when we talk about crisis ready organizations, whether we're talking about, on the for profit side, but in this conversation specifically about nonprofits who do out of school time enrichment work. And the biggest piece of it is being able to be adaptable, both in mindset, but also both in business practices as well. And so, what was really helpful for me, one was, so I have a background in public policy. And so for me, I have an understanding that our economy goes through cycles, highs and lows, ebbs and flows. And so it's really important as a leader to kind of like be able to be a step ahead of knowing when our economy is going to take a dip, but then also when the economy kind of auto corrects itself. And it balances itself out. And so I think that's important for leaders of organizations to kind of stay looped into what is actually happening, right? Whether it's something that is related to our mission areas or not, it's important to just know what is going on because we're all affected by it either way it goes. And so at the top of the year, when I knew we were going to have a new administration come in, I already was prepared. I knew that things were going to get a little rocky. And so for me, it gave me an opportunity to say, hey, this is a perfect time to pivot my complete business model because I knew that the market was going to take a dip as well. And so a lot of the clients that I have been working with throughout this year, we jumped into scenario planning early in the year because I wanted them to consider what was working well in their organizations, but like worst case scenario, what should we prepare for, right? And so even though like the worst case scenario conversation was scary for a lot of the organizations I had them with, it gave them the opportunity to be like, hey, we've got it all out on the table, we've talked about worst case scenario, so now we're actually better prepared for what could possibly happen. And so I think the reality was that organizations who were not having those conversations may have been kind of blindsided, when funding ended for a lot of organizations, a lot of foundations kind of pulled back their funding. And even still now in September, a lot of foundations and philanthropic organizations are kind of quiet about what their next steps are going to be. Earlier this year, we had the DEI rollbacks, which affected a lot of organizations as well. But because I knew what to kind of prepare for, I was able to have a lot of those conversations with my clients up front to be like, hey, like prepare for the worst, but expect the best. And I think it worked out really well for a lot of them to just kind of consider what they should keep their eye on. Now, I think what's been really interesting this year, also, as I mentioned a while ago, is that we've been in a technology revolution, which has really been impacting the workforce as well. And so, when I think about out of school time programming, where it is now, but where it's going, and I'm going to say in the next 5 years, I think what's really important in out of school time programming that leaders should really keep their eye on, but also be prepared for, is workforce readiness. So I know in the past few years, especially when I was still working in out of school time programming, a lot of our focus was social emotional learning. And not to say that that's not important, because again, like I mentioned, those core skills soft skills are always going to be important. But right now, what a lot of organizations should be looking at is getting students who are in out of school time programming career ready, because a lot is changing in the workforce. In July, I believe the Trump administration put out this really long report about this initiative when it comes to AI training. And a lot of states are starting to adopt it. I've even noticed a lot of our local universities are adopting it as well. And so what that means is that a lot of out of school time programmings, when there used to be a focus on STEM, now that focus needs to shift a little bit to career readiness, but specifically around one trades, because trades are really picking up now, but then also ensuring that the skills are the career skills that students need are actually for jobs that are going to exist in the future, not necessarily right now, right? The challenge with AI is that it's actually taking a lot of jobs that are just like routine input jobs. So when you think about like administrative jobs, things like I'm going to even say like secretarial roles, accountant roles, things of that nature, those jobs are going to look a lot different in 5 years. And so I think it's important that organizations who have students and are able to really get students ready for the future are helping them really understand how to prepare for a workforce that's going to look completely different than it does right now. So those are my initial thoughts. I know that sounds very abstract, but I am a nerd when it comes to reading and learning about the future of work. And so we all have to be prepared in our respective roles in our respective industries about how people need to be prepared and in what ways we need to prepare them.
No, that I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't call myself a nerd, but this is I think where we need to be thinking.
Mhm.
You don't you do your best to not let life happen to you, right?
Mhm. Right.
Do that by paying attention. And so no, I think it's like timely,
Yeah.
but I think it's also clear.
Mhm.
Um, you know, Today is not the day to talk about the step by step, but I think it's definitely something for organizations to write down. What does workforce readiness look like
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
my program? Like, what am I currently offering that aligns with
Mhm.
where we are, going? So
Mhm.
thank you for that answer, that feedback. So what lessons do you think OST leaders can take from what you just, shared?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. There's a lot of lessons that I think can come from it, but I think the biggest thing is really, are leaders willing and ready to kind of re-envision the work that they've been doing? I know a lot of times in our work we do work and we do it because this is what we've been doing. This is what we feel works for, our organizational mission. But I believe that we're in a space right now where I would love leaders who, run or manage out of school time programs to really consider, is it time to do something different? And if so, what does that look like? And I think now, again, with the climate that we're in, both politically and economically, I think this is a perfect time to explore, new opportunities or more innovative approaches to the work. Because I do believe, again, that especially when we talk about like the funding piece, right? I do believe that once funders start having more conversations, I think that they're also going to be looking at innovative programming as their funding priority as well. Now, we don't know what that's going to look like, but I think now is just a perfect opportunity for everyone to consider, like, is it time to re-envision and pivot and do something different than we've been doing before?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And change is hard. Um, you said the next 5 years, so programs, you have a little bit of time, because we're going to look up in 5 years, it's going to be here.
Before
So
you know
it's, start the conversations in your organization. Like,
it.
what does it look like? Because technology really is changing
Mhm.
the workforce.
Yes.
Now, for those who are watching live, we'd love to hear from you. Drop your questions in the chat. I'll weave them into our conversation with Dr. Daniels. We're going to move right along, Dr. Daniels, to our next question. From your seat, um, I think you do more of like systems change, type of work. What does it look like to lead with an abundance mindset in today's climate of scarcity? I've said this
Mhm.
specifically that Louisiana and Baton Rouge specifically has been going through crisis after crisis since 2000, starting with the 2016 flood.
Yeah.
Kind of like we can't catch a break, but also um, when there is a little break, we still find that like programs are running out of, money.
Mhm.
So, like, what does that abundance mindset look like?
Yeah. Oh, this is so good. Oh, yeah. It's so funny you ask this question. I've been having so many conversations with so many people in my circle about what does this look like. And the one word that keeps coming up, which will save us as a whole, is community. We
Mm,
have to
mm,
get back to
mm,
operating in community with each other. To me, that is like the truest like foundation of being able to function in abundance, right? And so what does that look like for me? So just recently, I hosted like a small party for my birthday that was last week. And so I did it. This is going to sound weird, but I'm going to explain it. I did it as kind of like a social experiment, right? Because I know right now we are in what I call an socialization epidemic, which
mm,
I'm finding that people are completely like disassociated from like, being together, going out. Like people are just completely checked out. And I get it, right? There's so much happening in the world. I mean, literally every day I try not to read the news because it's so much right now, but it's like every day you read the news and it's something new, that's happening in the world. And so I know that that is heavy for everybody, who is experiencing where we are right now. And I think the challenge with that is that like we barely got out of COVID before all of these new things started happening. And then to your point, it's almost like we can't catch a break. And so I find that people are just completely detached and desensitized, but also just like detached from people also. And so when I hosted this small event for my birthday, I kind of just really was there to observe how people function. And so one of the things I really enjoyed was that like conversation started flowing naturally and people started sharing stories and narratives with each
mm,
other. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Like, this is exactly what I was envisioning. Because community is important, right? We are in a space right now where people need to start functioning in community so we can share resources with each other. We can share opportunities with each other. We are in a position to be able to support organizations and kind of fill in gaps where organizations might be struggling to maybe meet certain needs. We really need to start sharing knowledge and insights with each other because I feel like that's most
mm,
important. And so I feel like abundance comes from being able to function within a community of people. What I also envision when I talk about like the future of not only future of work but also the future of our society is that folks are really going to need to function in community because we're going to see a lot of changes in the way that like our government systems operate, a lot of the ways that different systems in general operate. We're going to see a lot of institutions start functioning differently. And so we as people need to be in community to be able to have our voice heard. If we really want to talk about democracy, democracy functions in community also, right? And so I think if we can just kind of like figure out how to support each other in the individual work that we're doing, I feel like that is what the next 5 years will really be able to function in abundance if we're functioning as a unit together. So Again, that's my thought process, but I think it's no different than what we've seen in past decades and past generations, right? Again, our community, our society functions in cycles and patterns, and so we're really starting to see some of those patterns come back from like the civil rights era, right, where we need to really figure out how to kind of move in unison to kind of counteract a lot of the things that we're seeing right now. So that's my general thought, but I hope that that kind of provided some insight in terms of your question around abundance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to I want to I think dive a little deeper into that
Mhm.
question. Because when you think about scarcity, like
Mhm.
that mindset comes from fear, right?
Yes.
Or that mindset comes from trauma. That
Mhm.
mindset comes from, being burned. I mean, for some people, it unfortunately comes from, needing their name to be on it, needing it to be their idea. So, pride or ego. Um, but I think overall that mindset comes from, pain. You've
Yeah.
been burned before.
Mhm.
You've been, taken advantage of. So,
Mhm.
or, sometimes even childhood trauma, right? Like that's just the way you've learned to operate. So like,
Mhm.
how do, how do organizations evaluate
Mhm.
where they are on that scale? Like, where are you when it comes to that mindset? How do they do that without feeling shame?
Mm. Ooh, that so many good thoughts
No,
going.
sorry, look, sorry, I didn't ask you this
Oh,
ahead of time.
okay. I love this though because this is what I love to talk about, especially from an organizational perspective. Because I think a lot of times what I find is that we separate humanity from work, which is so odd to me. And so as a consultant, when I work with organizations, my goal is always human first. Like I'm always focused on like the human because if the human is not okay, the work is going to suffer, right? And so a lot of my strategy tends to be a lot different than other consulting firms because I want to work with people. Like that's just my passion. I feel like that's what I've been called to do. And so a lot of the way that I approach my work is mindset first. And so to your point, when we talk about scarcity, scarcity is definitely rooted in fear for sure, which for most humans, I mean, honestly, all of us, fear is our natural, kind of like our natural go to because our brains are wired for protection. And so, in a lot of cases, when we enter into situations, fear kind of precedes us because we're already thinking about kind of like, how do I protect myself in case something comes up, right? And so a lot of how I spend my time, but also again, how I tend to work with the leaders I work with is helping them kind of step away from that fear, stepping away from like worst case scenario thought processes and thinking about like, what's the best case scenario? Like, what's the best that could happen, right? What are the possibilities that could exist in this scenario? And then also thinking through again when we talk about abundance, like I always tell people, especially when I'm relating to other consultants, I always tell people there's enough opportunities out here for all of us, right? There's no need for us to compete because if we all are supporting each other, that's going to help us access more opportunities. And so I try to take that approach with organizations as well, especially again in the nonprofit space, because whether we name it or not, the fact of the situation is that there's a lot of nonprofits in competition with each other when in all honesty there should be collaboration across the board, because there's enough people who need to be served from whatever the mission is. Especially again when I think about out of school time programming, I mean organizations can only serve so many students, and so it's like but there's still a whole city of students that need support, and it might look a little bit different, for each student or each community. And so I think that there does need to be a better spirit of collaboration in the out of school time space or just in the nonprofit industry in general. I think one other thing that pushes people into a scarcity space is also limiting beliefs, which we also all have as well. And a lot of time limiting beliefs just come from like, we don't know what we don't know. But I think sometimes what happens is that we turn that don't know into like our truth when it's not necessarily like a universal truth. And so we're not willing to kind of like work with our own limiting beliefs, then I think that also creates roadblocks, and that is what creates a scarcity mindset also. And so again, I think if leaders are willing to kind of challenge themselves around just the way that they approach their work, I think we can kind of break down some of those walls of scarcity. There was something else I wanted to say and it slipped my mind, but it's gonna come back to me and I'm gonna say it.
Okay. Yeah. Look, interrupt at any point. And I will just say, providers, service providers in the OST field, as well as, any leader, I
Mhm.
challenge you to be curious because
Yeah.
really that's what it takes.
Mhm.
Curiosity is a fun space to be in.
Yeah.
Being a lifelong learner does not mean that you are going to like get it right. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you're going to be the Olympian. It doesn't mean anything other than like, I'm curious to know what I don't know.
Mhm.
So I love that you said that specifically because I often say, well, I don't know what I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm also a very curious person. So I don't justify learning.
Mhm.
One of my goals for 2025 is to take botany classes, and it's just because I want to learn more about plants. I
Yeah.
love to hike, so sometimes I see plants and I'm like, you're so beautiful. I wonder what you are.
Yeah.
And so, nope, I don't want to be a botanist. I don't want to write a book. I don't,
Mhm.
I will say that the curiosity has always like come full circle in, in some type of way. So
Mhm.
I love that you shared that mindset of that limiting belief and how it contributes to the scarcity mindset. But like I said, I challenge leaders, I challenge everyone
Mhm.
to just be curious.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up. I didn't know you like to hike. I love to hike. I think I know that. And so I think one of the things I wanted to add to your point was that I think we also have to talk about like mindset also spans whole organizations too, right? So
Mhm.
the mindset of the leader ultimately becomes the mindset of the staff and frontline workers who are working in
Yeah,
direct.
like the culture. Yeah.
Exactly. It becomes a culture of the organization. And so ultimately what happens, and I think sometimes it goes like unchecked or just maybe unrecognized, is that that culture also pours into how out of school time programs work with students also. I think one thing we have to be really careful about, again, when we talk about a culture of scarcity, is that then we are creating limited opportunities for the students who are being served, right? So then now we're making these assumptions about these students. Now we have these preconceived notions about these students. And at the end of the day, we're honestly harming them if we're not able to help them see the unlimited possibilities of the world that they live in. Because to me, that is like the core purpose of out of school time programming, to help students, to your point, be curious, but also explore like what they have the opportunity to be or who they have the opportunity to be. Um, so I think that we do need to check the culture when we talk about scarcity as a whole. One of the things I've been working on this year is this framework called the conversation gap. And so what it centers around is the culture of avoidance, right? And so a lot of times we know, I know you might have been in this space. I know I have for sure in the nonprofit space, is working in organizations where we essentially avoid conversations about the things we really should be talking about. And so that's something I've been really passionate about wanting to explore with organizations, that like like we have to talk about the hard stuff, and that's okay, right? We're all humans having different experiences within the same organization. And so we have to be able to like be comfortable with being able to talk about those things and stop avoiding what needs to be discussed, because I think that also leans into scarcity as well.
Oh yeah, that was great. I think we can stay on this question forever because things are constantly coming up as you share that. But as you share your thoughts. But I mean, it's truly these are the things that keep you from being future ready. Hard topics. Again, we're humans. But I love that you're bringing the process into it. So, I'm here in the zone of genius. And now, what was the one you just said? Conversation.
The conversation gap.
Conversation gap. Yeah, like these are frameworks,
Mm.
and tools that will help organizations move from scarcity to abundance. And it's a journey, right? So you're not just going to move towards that overnight, but you know these are tools that you can focus on and implement in your organization today.
Yeah.
So let's see. Our next question. You talked about collaboration. You've talked about it, like how we need to do it, and there are organizations who do it really well, and there are organizations who are challenged for different reasons, and then there are some organizations, they they say they're collaborators, but they're really not. In
Mm.
my personal opinion, if it has to be your name, you're not a collaborator.
Mm.
That's my personal
Yeah.
opinion. I haven't, researched that anywhere, but collaborators are focused on the mission, and the outcome more than they are on it being, their idea. And
Yeah.
so, yes, branding is definitely important. Funders definitely want to see that you are doing the work and you're successful in your outcomes.
Mm.
Um, but ultimately, the collaboration has to be about outcomes and the impact. So, can
Mm.
you share an example where collaboration helped your organization navigate a challenging time?
Yeah, I would say this is something I'm experiencing this week. So I have been in a space where leading any organization, again, whether the work that I'm doing as a consultant or the work you're doing as a ED, this work can be isolating a lot, right? Because we are leading whole organizations while still trying to help other organizations navigate the spaces that they're in. And so for me, it's been so beautiful lately. I've been connecting with a lot of other consultants who are doing similar, if not the same type of work, but just in a different capacity. And so it's been so beautiful because, like, even right now, like I looked at my text notifications and I have a few texts that came in, and it's like from peers that I'm working with who are like, hey, I came across this opportunity. I think you should look into it. Or, hey, let's get together. I have this proposal I want to, explore, and I think you would be a great fit for it. And so, again, that goes back to that community piece, right? Where it's like, then it's not just me working in my own silo. Now I'm working with others and we're moving missions forward together as a group. And so it's not, and again, to your point, it's not about, I don't need my name on things. Like, I don't need, my face on things. I just want to be able to like do the work that I've been called to do. But I'm so grateful and blessed that now I have people who are willing and wanting to do it with me. And so I think nonprofits and out of school time service providers can really, take that same approach. Like, let's figure out ways to do this work together. Like, it doesn't have to be just this organization doing it here and then this organization doing it here. I mean, there's strength in numbers. And if people can figure out ways to truly collaborate, I think that, is going to push everybody's mission forward a lot faster, and to your point, really reach those outcomes. So that's, I think, the simplest example I can give.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I often say more hands make light work. And
It does.
like,
Honestly, it's like a breath of fresh air when people text me and they're like, "Hey, I have some work I want you to help with." So you mean to tell me I don't have to do it all by myself? Like I received that, you know?
yeah. Well, what we often know, like, many organizations want to collaborate, and then the challenge is funding. A lot of times, it's funding. Um, so, tell us what makes a funding or service model crisis resilient, and what examples stand out as models to learn from.
Mm, that's a good question. It's definitely a layered question for sure. One of the things that I think is super important right now when we talk about like crisis resiliency, but especially in funding, is the idea of sustainability and being able to reverse engineer. So I have a client right now that I'm working with. And so one of the things they're about to step into like a new venture with the organization. And so one of the things that I've been having them think about is, okay, you're planning for right now, but what about next year, right? Or what about in 5 years? And so we've really been leaning into, let's talk about sustainability, what the future of this work looks like, and then let's work backwards from there. And so I've been encouraging organizations to build sustainability plans on top of scenario plans and really be able to have those two kind of work together. Because I will say, I think right now when it comes to conversations with funders and foundations and philanthropists, I think, yes, they are willing to fund for now, but I think they also are curious about then what happens after you get this funding, right? Or then what happens if I give you this funding, let's say for just a year, and then how do you sustain this work that you're doing? So I think if organizations have the capacity to be able to think about building a sustainability plan, but then also thinking through like different scenarios around that plan, I think that is the best way for organizations to think through just like crisis resiliency. But I think on top of that, when we talk about right now, because I know people need money right now, I think a part of that is innovation. That's the key word that I'm going to stick with. That is the hill I'm going to stand on is innovation. Right now, there are a lot of funding opportunities for technology. And so if organizations can figure out how to maybe integrate technology into their programming, and it can be something as simple as like, let's say it's an out of school time program that also does mentoring, right? Maybe thinking about building like a platform that allows your mentors to like track their engagement with their mentee and then be able to track those outcomes and results and just the growth that comes with that. And then, pitching that to a tech investor to say, hey, we have this innovative platform for our mentoring program or for our out of school time program. I think again, right now, it requires a lot of creativity, but a lot of innovation, and really just not to get in a space of mission drift, but like figuring out where the funding is and then thinking how that funding or how those whatever is being funded can be integrated into the work or the mission of that organization. And so like I mentioned right now, there's so much funding for technology. And so I think it's a great time for nonprofits to really think through how they can get a piece of that pie.
When I think about our directory, of course, we have over 60 youth serving organizations in our coalition. And I'm thinking about like they're from, there are programs and services. So we have organizations that serve the homeless all the way to programs that absolutely implement the out of school time programs model. So I'm thinking about what you're saying about innovation and technology. I would love it if there was someone, in the audience that had a question about, implementing technology into some programs and services. I think that have less to do with enrichment, because I think there may still be space. But I'm wondering if anybody in the audience has ideas. So we have a little less than 7 minutes. So please, like, share your comments or questions in the chat, and let's discuss. Let's dive deep.
Yeah. And I
Um,
see there is a question.
oh, there is. Okay.
The question said, "How early should workforce readiness initiatives begin in schools? How early in age?"
Ooh.
Yeah, so I can answer this question.
Yes.
So I'm going to answer this question based on some a meeting I attended a few weeks ago. The Louisiana Board of Regents has a career readiness task force, and so I had the privilege of attending the most recent task force meeting, and so what they're suggesting is that workforce readiness initiatives should begin as early as like kindergarten. Because again, what they're thinking about is the future of work, not just right now. And so what they mentioned in that conversation is that the focus for workforce readiness is not just the technical skills, but again, those core skills, right? So we can start kids as early as kindergarten, helping them understand effective communication or helping them understand problem solving and conflict resolution and conflict management. I think if we're able to start integrating those skills as early as possible, those are the necessary skills that are going to take, youth and students into a workforce where they're ready to be hired and ready to do good work. And I actually agree with that. Like, I think those skills can start early as possible. I think about myself. I'm 38, and sometimes I struggle with communication. And I'm like, if I would have learned this earlier, that would be really helpful. I know it was funny. One of the things I used to struggle with when I did work a 9 to 5 before I started my business was conflict management in the workplace. Like, anytime I would get feedback, I would literally like crumble and like just not be functional, right? But I think that's a thing that a lot of people struggle with, because that's a skill that I don't find is often taught to people. I think there's just an assumption that we should know how to manage these things as adults. But all of these skills that we have as people, they have to be taught. And then not only taught, but we have to be able to practice these in places that are safe and psychologically effective for us. So I agree. I think workforce readiness initiatives should start as early as possible.
Yeah, and I think, when I think about my own kids, but also when my kids were young, I did like substitute teach in their classes. So I was engaged with other kindergartners, and I do think that these things are being taught, but they're not being measured. They're not being intentionally measured. And so I think, for some who go, oh my gosh, kindergarten, they're just kids, just let them be kids. But you start teaching them, how to use their manners. You start teaching them how to, use their words instead of crying. So I think these things are being taught. It's just that we need to start like measuring the effectiveness, because you're right. I think it's probably at that middle school time where you really need to start honing in on the communication skills, because I feel like we kind of lose them, whether it's developmental, hormonal things. It is really a pivotal time to start teaching them, especially the conflict. That is huge. There are a lot of kids today who you cannot tell anything. They're very sensitive, and for good reason. Not to say that it's bad to be sensitive. I'm a very sensitive person. But it's something about, one, the way you give feedback, but also the way you receive feedback. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Do we have any more questions in the chat? We're at less than 2 minutes, so I'm going to ask you for your closing thoughts, and unless we have another question. Do we have another question?
I see some comments.
Okay, can you just read those comments?
Yeah, so Takoa left some amazing comments. So first, one, I believe I was talking about building community. And so she mentioned Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, addresses what I named about, I guess, just working in community when we talk about abundance. And then another comment she left about enrichment metrics should and can be tied to tangible social determinants of health and are tangible metrics established by school or the school system they operate. I agree. And that's the point you just mentioned, Jasmine, about that, these skills are being taught, but possibly not measured effectively by
Yeah.
school systems.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Daniels. I knew that, having you on would be, so rich. And I love what you're doing with your consulting firm. If you can tell them how to, get in touch with you if, they are interested in your services, but also I know that I've had you at 2 conferences. We'll have you back to talk about scenario planning, zone of genius, and conversation gaps. And so let them know how they can, connect with you.
Yeah, definitely. I would love for folks to reach out to me directly. My business email is Sonia, SONIA at sdanielsconsulting.com. If folks want to just reach out to me directly, I would love to set up time to chat. I just love talking about the work that I do. But if folks are looking to kind of just get a feel for what it is that I do in the work that I do, I recommend that they connect with me on LinkedIn, which I'm super active on LinkedIn. I think this is an amazing platform. And I have my LinkedIn page, which is Sonia Daniels, PhD, but then also the business page is SDC. And they can connect with both. And I post a lot of content there. But I just love being able to share the insights that I do. So I welcome, more opportunities to chat, whether in small groups or on larger stages, or like you mentioned, facilitation opportunities. I'm open, willing, and welcoming those type of opportunities. So would love to be connected to folks.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Daniels. I can't thank you enough for your insight and your candor. What you've shared today, it challenges us to think differently and about how we fund, support, and collaborate in youth development. So we appreciate you and look forward to, future endeavors.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.